because everybody has to be on board.
So you talk about therapists. So I've talked to a lot of families. I have friends who have adopted kids, and a common theme that I hear is, "Oh, we tried therapy," or "They got worse after therapy," or "I can't find a good therapist. I can't find an attachment therapist." Like, but we did camp, or we did EMDR, or we did neurofeedback, or we did, the nutrition and all these different things. Like, it feels like people are just trying to figure out how to help their child. So how do you sift through, like, therapists, finding a therapist, and then the different healing modalities?
So I love I love EMDR. I love neurofeedback. I love NET, cranial sacral. These are all tools and pieces to the puzzle for holistic healing. For the therapist is like the main, whoever the attachment therapist is, it's like the main surgeon. And then these other people are like they're part of the doctors. They're part of the team. It's just they have a different function. EMDR, I do brain spotting. It helps get some of those walls, those defenses down in a quicker manner, and can help with a breakthrough and time wise. But for those who have been through a lot of I went to one family that I want to say they had like 15 therapists before me. It was something crazy
Oh,
amount. And they were like, I don't know what you think you're gonna do better, but
yeah.
everything changed. It's what makes me or other attachment therapists that are good in the field is you have to have you have to have testimonies of where there's been healing and where they've come to the other side. A lot of people, even when I was, so there was a couple of the therapists when I was learning this, one that called themselves attachment therapists. They only went out to Mike and Terry for one intensive, and it was not ongoing that they would get training like I did and hands-on and experiential training over and over again. I did it for 4 years where I would go back and forth. That's what makes a therapist good or not good is where you learn, you get from mentorship, how to be a good therapist, how to attune to these kids, how to do the techniques to help them go from one phase to the next phase in their healing. There's a certain protocol in what I've learned in how to help these children heal. We're trying to get to their core rage. We're trying to get to their core secrets. Secrets is always one of the first steps to help them unpack these things. Um, so ultimately, a lot of therapists only know how to do cognitive behavioral therapy. They're doing talk therapy. They're asking questions to these kids or to you as parents, and they're using regular parenting techniques. Behavior modification, it does not work. Spanking does not work with these kids. I'm not saying that every now and again you're not going to get they're not going to like submit in fear to some of those techniques because they do some of the time, but long term it doesn't help them become a child that wants to submit that I've seen. So long term, they need to feel like you're in the emotions with them. And I think that's the other piece, Heather and Athena, like so many families don't like emotions. They don't want to feel let their kids or they don't like to feel mad. Mad is a neutral emotion. There's nothing wrong with anger. It's what we do with our anger, right? That makes it good or bad, sin or not sin. So I think that's also a big thing where if you have parents who are more versed in knowing what they're feeling and being expressive and knowing how to express themselves in their feelings, they can help their children get there quicker too, because that's what they're drawing out. Tell me how you feel. All their behaviors are words acted out.
Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit more about brain spotting? You mentioned that you do brain spotting. What is that?
So, brain spotting was developed by David Grand, and it helps get to the limbic system of the brain through your eyes. And it's just seeing um, where someone's eyes go when they're talking about a feeling or behaviors. And um, so when I see where somebody's eyes are gravitating towards when we're talking about something, like so for the client, if they're talking about their anger, it's a nice back door to do brain spotting, because we can, if I can connect them to where their eyes are going to, they can start remembering things that may be repressed, and they can understand themselves through that in a deeper way of why that is linked in a behavior, or even where there's pressure in their body somewhere. So if they have a sick feeling to their stomach, or if they have a tight neck or even a headache, when we focus on that, and I have them zoom in on that just by mentally connecting to it more, and I see where they might be, their eyes might be sitting. If we hit the right spot, they can uncover and unpack things a whole lot quicker. That really is where I see either decisions or lies that they have taken in their trauma, in their pain, in their wounds sit. And that's what we're trying to expose. And we want God and Jesus to reveal the truth to them, not the lies. We don't want them to believe the lies that they were either told or what they took in because of how they thought about themselves during an event.
So you mentioned Jesus and God. So can you talk about that, just with not only the therapy that you do and the brain spotting, but other things like um, cranial sacria or NET or some of these other things that may honestly bring a question mark, like, is this okay to do if you're a Christian? Is it new agey? Is it like, how do you discern and sort of sift through all those things?
Okay, so my belief with everything, because I'm skeptical because of the new age movement is, it's everywhere. And so I do get concerned with some of the modalities, and you need to really sift through who you're going to use even in those modalities. So for me, um, I will pick somebody who respects my beliefs if they're not a Christian. So there's a woman in my building who does NET. She's not a Christian, but she does NET, and I let her know, you know, my beliefs. So when we're going through that process of the muscle testing or connecting memories, for me or for one of my children, I'll always, she goes, oh, I think it's this age, what happened here? When she has me focus on something, I'm always inviting Jesus in. I'm not asking the universe. I'm not asking myself, because
Yeah.
I don't believe I have the power to heal anything, including myself. Jesus and God, they hold all the power and all the healing. And so that's where I, make sure that I focus, my children focus on. of ask Jesus this. We bring Jesus into those things. So if you can't find a Christian, you can still use those techniques um and bring Jesus in. Now, I will say this, one of my other families who has been going to an NAT, like the one woman who does it, I told her to stop going there because she was not respecting their belief system, and she was trying to push her agenda onto them. Like reincarnation stuff and
Mhm.
stuff that just wasn't. So there are some, professionals that don't respect that. And then you just got to cut the ties and go, I got to find somebody else that's going to be a better fit. So don't be afraid to do that. But like, so for EMDR, you also want to find, or brain spotting, you want to find someone with the same faith based, because in everything that we do, you can invite spiritually other things into the session with you or into your mind.
Right.
We want to be cautious about that. Um, we don't want other things spiritually taking place. We only want Jesus or God's love, God's peace, God's truth to be the things that transform our hearts and minds, not anybody else, not anything else. So that's a critical piece. But there's lots of professionals who are believers out there. It's just finding them.
Right. And then, so like with, you were talking about like the lies and the decisions or vows, like, is the spiritual component a part? Like, how does that fit in with the work you do with a client?
So for okay, so I'll say this. Not all therapists do things like I do it that are good. This is an extra component that I have just over the years seen is extremely effective. Where when there is vows that a child or an adult make in pain, I believe that makes a spiritual wall happen, a disconnect, or maybe even isolates. Um, And in that, we zoom in, we focus on that. What decision do you like? So for a child, do you think you decided you weren't ever going to trust anybody ever again in that moment? Or what do you think you decide in that moment? And they say, well, I can't trust anybody. Are you ready to break that vow? And then we break it with the blood of Jesus always, because that's the only thing that has the power to break spiritual decisions. His death and resurrection, he holds all the power for that. So I walk them through a recanting of a decision that they made, and then I invite them to ask Jesus to speak to them in their heart, in their soul, in their mind. And they'll either get a word, they'll get a feeling, they'll get peace that floods them, they might get a picture. Everybody's different. And um it's pretty amazing to watch, because we all take in decisions in our pain, because that's where the enemy tricks us to go,
Right.
um, I got to protect myself, or I'm not going to do this. No, Jesus wants to be included in all of our decisions every day, a million times a day. Jesus was always looking to the Father for every step he took. He never took one without asking the Father. Man, we're so far from that as a society, or as even as believers, but that's where he wants us to mimic him. And so where we haven't, and where we've sort of shut down something, or we said, well, I'm going to take this part down, you're too busy or whatever, or in our pain, that's what we have to undo. And then we want his will to be done in that, and for him to change us. And if we need to repent and say, please forgive me, I should not have done that, Jesus. And we have to repent from that and ask for his forgiveness. And then everything starts changing.
And so, how long does it take before you can, for a client, for a child to be comfortable enough with you to do that sort of deeper surgical work spiritually?
So, it varies according to the trauma. Um, for a child with attachment wounds, it's usually at least a couple years. They should make, I mean, we should be well on our way at our year mark.
Okay.
Um, but it just depends on how much trauma. The more mild the trauma or the less trauma they have, the quicker they heal. The one that I referred to with the in utero trauma, he healed within a year, a little over a year, because there was
Right.
no trauma. It was a couple minutes after birth that they adopted him,
Yeah.
and he never saw his um he didn't have to go back and forth. He wasn't didn't see his birth family ever again.
Right. And so, can you also talk about like the intensives that you do? I know we've done multiple intensives with you and some of the girls who've stayed with us. Um, how does an intensive differ from just doing regular therapy?
Okay, so intensives are 3 hours a day, back to back, Monday through Friday. Usually we have a weekend off for 10 days. Uh, Back to back therapy. It's extremely exhausting because wearing we're wearing both the parents and the child down and their defenses. See, every time in between sessions, that child or teen has time to recover and to get their strategies back on how to um, protect themselves. It's just natural, it's automatic pilot for them. So they just start their guard. Even the parents that come with 2 weeks of life coming in between, or a week of life coming in between, either or, it's a lot of days.
Mhm.
It's a lot of time in between. And so when you do an intensive, you're chipping away at the iceberg every single day. You're getting deeper and deeper. And emotionally, you're not able to sustain a hard stance where things aren't affecting you. So it's really helpful. We usually say somewhere between 6 months to a year's worth of therapy can be accomplished if the family, the mom, the dad, and the child are all working hard.
Mhm.
You can eliminate a year in
Wow.
2 week intensive. So, and for intensives, for my more severe clients, we wait for that piece because that's the piece where we're really hoping that they choose to get their rage out of their heart. I mean, that's the goal of an intensive, is where they choose to get the hate out of their heart and choose love over hatred.
Nice. And so, what about what are some tips or advice you could give for parents, just like in the day in and day out? Like, at camp, you learn about like flight checking and that whole thing. And like, how do you walk out keeping structure, but also being playful, having fun, being nurturing, being attuned? Like, what does that look like inside of a home?
Okay, that's a good question. So the velvet lined steel box that Nancy talks about, that's 50% of what needs to happen in the home. The other half is the nurturing piece. So if you're just doing the structure and there's no buy-in for the child, there's no nurturing, there's no connection, there's no fun, there's no play in the interaction relationally. Okay, I'm not talking about isolatory play. I'm not talking about, them doing their Lego play. That's not relational. You've got to have them buy in through connection of playing and talking or doing a task together or a craft together or something or a walk together, but you're stopping, you're pausing, you're looking into each other's eyes, you're getting attuned to what's going on with that child. That piece is also 50%. Um, Without that piece, the other part is just producing a robot, not a daughter or a son. And I think that's the other piece that I see a lot after Nancy's camps. Now, Nancy is brilliant. See, the thing with Nancy is she naturally has this ability to do both. It's
Yeah.
innate for her. And I don't know how well she communicates that is like a part of all of it with the other families there that's critical. Because I do think that so many people are coming in so desperate for help. They want a formula. And then when they read When Love Is Not Enough, or they get her DVDs or whatever stuff she has, they're like, okay, 1 + 1 = 2. Mm-mm. It's not like that. There's no formulas. There's tools in your tool belt that you can try and use, but some tools work for some kids, some don't. You got to find what works for your children, and you throw out the ones that don't work and you
Hmm.
keep the ones that do. But that piece of trying to get them, you have to pour in hope to these kids because these kids, most of them are hopeless and they're shut down and they don't know any good feelings except dopamine hits.
How
Mm.
do you get them to buy into hope?
So that's through connection with the parent and the parent constantly saying, we're going to get through this together. I'm not giving up on you. And making sure that when you say it, your vibe means it.
Mhm.
See, a lot of times, we think we can fool our kids by telling them, I'm in this forever, but they can pick up on our vibe. And if you don't stop, I'm sending you somewhere in a month. And I don't even care where. Like they can pick these kids are so hyper vigilant and sensitive to everybody's vibes. And with that is like you can't fool them in that sense.
Right.
They know. So if you're burnout and you're ready to send them off somewhere, they can pick up on that and they're like, "Well, I'm not going to give you what you want because you're just going to send me no matter what anywhere." It's really important that what's really going on, my truth in me matches my words with them and really trying to connect with them, or else it's going to be pointless.
Right.
Mm. Lori, it sounds like just from everything you're saying, you do so many different things. Like it's a very multifaceted approach compared to some maybe um, kind of standard therapies that are out there, like play therapy or talk you mentioned. Um, so do you think a parent with a standard therapist could get through, like could logically get through this process and get to healing? And or doing it alone without a therapist, but just doing camp or just doing these other parent modalities? Can you speak to that, if that makes sense?
So yeah, I would say most of the time, no. I mean, with God, he can do whatever he wants whenever he wants. So
Yeah.
I'll never say without a therapist, you can't heal because God is all about he'll do whatever he wants. And so I'm sure that there have been people who have healed with a lot of prayer and submission and surrender, maybe in just a different format. But most of the time, I see a lot of families who never got to healing and that just, now have these adult children who use them for what and then have left and don't care, or they're getting in trouble in other ways, and or they're going into jail, or they're addicts, drug addicts, alcoholics, or other things where they're just self-destructing. So yes, I think for real healing, um, it does take a therapist to help lead and guide through the different events so they can grieve the losses. The parents can grieve the dream of what it was supposed to look like and what the reality it is. That's an important piece too. But cognitive behavioral doesn't touch this. Um, Behavior modification doesn't touch this. There's a lot of really great therapists that are trauma focused, therapeutic, like EMDR, without knowing the attachment piece. I don't think you can make the strides. Honestly, it's a piece. They're a piece of a puzzle. They're not, they don't know how to help completely, but they can get you so far.
Yeah.
It's better than nothing.
Well, and they only usually work with just the child as well, often,
Well,
right?
yes. And that's the other piece that I will also say. I mean, these kids are known to, lie all the time, right? So even when they're in with the therapist, if they're by themselves, how do we know what they're saying is even the truth? Or they're just like, oh, I'm going to waste this person's time. And they're so stupid because they don't know I'm wasting their time. And they're
Hmm.
not even getting to the real stuff. So it's really important that, like, every time I work with the child, the parents are in here with me.
Yeah.
They know what we're doing because they have to. And we don't have any, I don't, I don't take what the child's word is. I ask the parent, is that true? Is this valid? Tell me more about this. Do you see it like that? Um, because usually I'm getting, very different stories from either the parent and the child or the teen.
So more a partnership with the parents compared to regular traditional therapies.
Yes, I rarely ever will meet with a child or a teen by myself, and I've only done it if the parents have requested it for some reason that I think is it could be helpful. Most of the time, I don't see it as helpful. I see it's more just it prolongs the process, or we're not working towards the goals that we need to have. But there are exceptions to the rule for everything. Sometimes there is, an exception that the child needs. If like a parent has gotten abusive in their anger, and if you have, not one where, it needs to be called in or anything, but where there's, it created something that the parent usually, I'm going to respect that they need to talk about this without me because
Yeah.
I damaged that relation. I damaged them in that. And so it can be a healing thing, but that's not the norm. That's an exception to the rule. And then I bring the parent in even
Yeah.
afterwards to talk about what we talked about and what happened because we're moving towards healing. We're not moving towards just I'm connecting with them, they're staying in their whatever feelings that they're having. We're ultimately wanting to move through it where the child forgives and heals
Yeah.
and connects again and is building trust with the parent, and the parent is connecting and nurturing the child, and the child's letting, or the teen's letting them nurture them.